Well, guys, I think we're gonna get started here. I wanted to kind of talk to you a little bit about what's gonna happen on Monday. And so I'm expecting all of you guys to have your video presentations ready to go. And I'm starting to get them trickling in, and that's okay. You still have 4 or 5 days to wrap this up. But the second thing I want to let you know about, and that is just a second, I lost my screen. There it is. What I wanted to let you know about is quiz 5 is basically a discussion on the presentations. And that'll launch after or as soon as you guys start doing your presentations. But in essence, I want you to put up a post saying what you liked about a particular presentation or your critique of a particular presentation. And so that's the first entry on the discussion board. But I'll also want you to reply to 2 others' posts. And so I'll go over that with you on Monday, but it's all set up. And how many of you have had discussion boards in your classes? Nobody? Kenzie, Maddie? Good. All right, good. Might need your help explaining this when we get there, but I have an online class and we use that all the time. And as a matter of fact, it's a pretty good tool. So I want to wrap up chapter 31 today, and we're getting real close, or close, kind of close to the present. Remember I showed you this. I think this is one of the last that I showed you, and I talked about it being photorealism or what they call hyperrealism. And this was a painting idea. But there were sculptors doing the same thing. And this one's the most famous of them all. The artist, that is, not the work itself. Dwayne Hanson, Supermarket Shopper, 1970. And so what he begins to do is that hyperrealism, just like we saw in the painting. Let me see, I'm getting some. Austin's here. All right, let me shore this up. Cade, Austin, Cat. Sadie. Okay. Late arrivals. Got to give them credit. Anyway, look at what it's made out of. Fiberglass, polychromed in oil with clothing, steel cart, groceries, life size. So this guy starts making hyperreal sculpture. And he's actually wrote a book about this, and it's actually instructions on how to make this, how you can make casting from the fiberglass resin and so on. Real shoes, real clothes, real curlers, etc. And so it becomes not idealized, but real. And it's got real groceries in here, but although I'm sure that some of the food had been taken out of those boxes, you know what I mean. Bottom line is that sculptors are getting in on this idea too, of being able to make things that are just more real than anything we'd seen before, just like Audrey Flack. And so anyway, this is the example in our textbook. Most museums have a Dwayne Hansen in their collection. I want to tell you about the one that's at the Kansas City Nelson Atkins Museum of Art. It's one of these sculptures, hyper real, and it is of a gallery guard. And so there's this guy, and he's older, got a little mustache, looked like a retiree, kind of getting some employment or something at the museum. It's got his official blue hat. Looks like a mall cop, if you will. And he stands there. It's a sculpture, but it's so real. And the way they place this, he's kind of standing right there by the door. And there are hundreds of stories about how museum goers would come up to this sculpture, and ask for the directions. Can you tell me where the bathroom is? Am I going the right way? Stuff like that. Anyway, then they go complain to the desk. That museum guard acted like I wasn't even there. What a rude person. He was not helpful at all. Look at the placard. Here's another one that's in Milwaukee, which is really kind of funny too. It's a guy, it's a janitor, dressed in janitor clothes, looks like a janitor. And he's leaning up against the wall with a broom in his hand, and it's as though he's sleeping, standing up. Looks like somebody's sleeping on the job. So anyway, he's got a sense of humor, and Dwayne Hansen changed what we thought about sculpture, because never before has sculpture been so real, at least in the modern era, been so real that it actually fooled people. It was quite lifelike. And so anyway, got a bunch of other kinds of little bits and pieces. What we find out here is, did I get somebody new here? Let me check. You guys said Gabriel is here. All right. I think I have you all accounted. So we have different kinds of things going on. Photographers, Robert Frank. So tell me what this is about, just by looking at it. Trolley, New Orleans. Basically, public transportation. And back in the day, public transportation really didn't, air conditioning was not really a thing back then. But you see, notice anything about this? Does this look wrong? Right? What? The front of the trolley, the back of the trolley. Right at the same time, this is in New Orleans, Rosa Parks, Montgomery bus boycott. The idea that blacks had to sit at the back of the bus and the whites got to sit in front. racial segregation, racial apartheid. So it's kind of a benign thing, but as I've been saying, politics kind of comes back into art in a pretty major way. And I'm not sure that it ever left, but it's an influence. And I wanted to mention this. This is kind of an obvious thing. What's the title of this course anyway? I know what you're thinking. You're the teacher. You already know. World Art and Ideas. Ideas are a big part of this class, and it's been a big part of what I've been talking about. And the ideas are really the means to understand why the work was created and what the work is about. And so this is basically an political piece. And as we saw in earlier, Ansel Adams, Edward Weston in photography, Arthur Dove, George O'Keeffe, nature abstraction. That's something that still goes on in photography and still to this day. And so what we have here is this rock formation, but it's really like an abstract painting in its own way. Politics. Judy Chicago, the dinner party. Anybody know about this? This used to be taught quite extensively in high schools for a long time. See, it's like 40-something years old now, but it's considered one of the most important works of the time. The Dinner Party, Judy Chicago, 1979. All of those bits of information are important because what we have, talking about politics, we have, I showed you the civil rights movement. This is the women's movement. Of course, this is kind of later on, but this is a piece about women in art and in culture. And what Chicago did here is that she made these table settings, place settings, if you will, and if you, I'll zoom in on her a little bit. You see the knife and fork and spoon, and you know the what's on the plate, what's written here, embroidered here, and what we see all over the floor on the tiles. Famous women, women who have contributed to art and culture. Isadora Duncan, for example, right here. These place settings identify an individual woman, artist, writer, someone who had contributed to the culture over the years. And by the way, in 1979, most were still not very well known because art history, literary history, and a lot of just history in general excluded the contributions of women. And that's really what this is about. And so you'll find, if you do literary history, you'll see that a number of women writers oftentimes took a pseudonym, a false name, of a male and wrote under that name. Likewise, in art, a number of women, sculptors, painters, took on another name, and historians in the 1970s, they were digging a lot of things up, and they were finding that women had contributed much more than had previously been known. And so anyway, these place settings are for a notable woman, and each has its own embroidered tablecloth. What Chicago did in this piece was enlist the help of a lot of women artists to help put this together, especially those who were doing the things like embroidering the tablecloths and so on. So it's about women, and there's a lot of symbolism here too, that the triangle is representative of women. There's been a lot of things written about that in Chicago. Judy, Chicago was a pretty avid, outspoken feminist. And so anyway, this is like, this is in the Brooklyn Museum, if you ever get a chance, and it's in its own room, and the room is surrounded with glass windows, and you can kind of walk around the outside, but it stays in this dark space, and it's lit just like this. And so anyway, women, there was a book titled this, Women Making Their Mark. Miriam Shapiro, Anatomy of a Kimono. 10-panel composition, 1976. Fabric and acrylic on canvas. One of the things that some of the women artists of the 1970s used as a strategy was to make their work with the materials that women had been making art with for centuries. For example, women had, for hundreds of years, been the ones doing quilt making. Doing quilt making was, if you will, a woman's activity, a woman's way of making art. And usually in a family, one of the women in the family would take the responsibility of creating a quilt that memorialized the history of the family. And so fiber arts becomes a new medium, an old medium, but a medium taken up by artists as part of their artistic statement. And so with that, I want to show you somebody that's not in this, but I want to show her. One of my favorite artists. Her name is Faith Ringgold. And slideshow from the beginning. What are we sharing? Yes, that's what I want. There she is. And that's me, by the way. I had an opportunity to work with her a long time ago. And as you can see here, she's carrying, you guys know what that is she's got in her hands? See, you guys are too digital. These are slide carousels. That's how we taught these classes. That's how we communicated about our work. was with the 2-inch slides, color slide, Kodak 2-inch. And you'd put them in this carousel that would typically hold like 80 slides, made by Kodak. There's your Kodak. Anyway, Faith Ringgold. And she was born in 1931, so that kind of makes her in her 90s. Or at, yeah, 91, 92. But at any rate, I had the opportunity to work with her because we brought her to Truman. This is the airport in Kansas City. She flew from her studio in La Jolla, California, out to Kansas City, but she did not like commuter flights. So I drove down to Kansas City, which was like so cool. Why was that cool? Because she and I could talk all the way there, 3 hours to Kirksville and back. She told me a lot of wonderful stories. Bottom line, she takes up a lot of these ideas too, and I want to kind of jump ahead. These are some of her quilts, and this is from the 1980s. Who's Afraid of Aunt Jemima? Quilt and book by Faith Ringgold. Again, women bringing back or bringing into this realm of what we would call avant-garde art or high art, and bringing those traditional materials associated with women. And so anyway, as I was saying a moment ago, family history, that was part of traditional quilt making. And so she does it. She has her story. She has this story here. And it says, Who's Afraid of Aunt Jemima? I wanted to show you this piece because this is all right smack dab in feminist art. The Liberation of Aunt Jemima by Betty Saar, somebody who Faith Ringgold actually knew, and that is Who's Afraid of Aunt Jemima? And we got this. This is cut out of an old pancake batter mix ad, Aunt Jemima pancakes. They got rid of a lot of this stuff, by the way, because it was so racist. But there was a lot of racism and sexism, even in advertising and naming products. There was this, I don't know if you guys ever seen this, cream of wheat. It was a cereal, was basically kind of like grits, but it was made out of wheat instead of corn. Grits come from corn, but bottom line is that the logo for cream of wheat was this African American man dressed in a white clothes, carrying a bowl of cream of wheat to serve you. And the guy was, how should I say this? He was a porter on a train. He was a guy that would, there were a lot of African Americans working on trains at the time. Trains were a means of transportation until air lines kind of took over, but bottom line, you could eat, and they had a lot was employment for a lot of Black people. Anyway, Aunt Jemima, these are all images out of the pancake mix. And so Betty Saar gives her the broom, gives her a rifle. The Liberation of Aunt Jemima. And so, and you see here, I don't know, I've got to zoom in on this because it's hard to see. And a Black Power fist. Betty Saar, feminist, opponent of racial segregation, apartheid, racism and stuff. But anyway, when I was talking with Faith Ringgold, I asked her about this piece. I said, what is that? You know, what's going on here? Well, Faith had a different take on Aunt Jemima. She didn't think that Aunt Jemima was particularly offensive, which is kind of what this story tells. But Faith Ringgold, mother's quilt, she has generations of women in her family. Street story quilt. And this is from her upbringing in Harlem. And the dinner quilt. And, you know, all of these are about her life story. And the flag story quilt. And so anyway, I'm gonna back up though, because early on, she was a painter and she was making art about civil rights, the social unrest, and the racism here. And the flag is bleeding here. This even has a title that I will refuse to say, but you can see it's written right here. And it's written all over the United States flag. Bottom line, doesn't take it's not so subtle, doesn't take a lot of thought to figure out exactly what it is she's saying with this work. US postage stamp commemorating the advent of Black Power, 1967. So anyway, this is basically right at the time when there was a lot of social unrest over the racism, the apartheid, civil rights, etc. And so anyway, that's what she did in the 60s, more or less. In the 70s, she made these things. And this is another art form that goes back to her heritage. And and I asked her about this too. That was a wonderful person. I just loved her to death. What this is that one of the crafts that was fairly well practiced during the slave era in the United States was that the slaves, they didn't really have a lot of resources and they didn't have any freedom or anything, they weren't paid or anything. They were poor, they were forced to work the fields. But one thing that they did was that they picked up scraps of little things here and there, and they made dolls. They made these as playthings for their children. And she took that and made portraits in a traditionally African-American way. And there's been a lot written about this kind of artwork because it was largely ignored for quite a long time. And when we started studying African-American history, what we found is that there were a lot of skills that the captured enslaved Africans brought with them here. And those traditions carried on even through slavery. And there's a kind of a lineage here about this as craft, as an art making, as part of the culture. But there's a lot of other things like having to do with music and other kinds of storytelling that survived, that flourished through slavery. And so, and what Faith Ringgold likes to do, performance, art, and this is one of her quilts that she's actually dressed in. And as you can see, she quite a bit looks like a shaman. performing a ritual. This is the university. And these, these dolls, I showed you these. She actually made these of Jimmy, Rosalind, and Amy Carter. And so then in the 80s, quilting with that kind of personal story and with an eye towards civil rights. And so I'm looking for one here. I'm kind of looking, this is all autobiographical, by the way. And one of the things, oh, here it is. Tar Beach, 1988. Any of you ever seen this? It's a children's. She wrote a children's book. It was Peabody, what is it? I forgot. Anyway, the major award for children's literature. She won that for this book. And what this represents is her story in Harlem, New York, and at night in the summer, everybody would go up on the roof and eat dinner, and the children would lay on this blanket and pretend they were at the beach. And they called it the Tar Beach. And you can see clothes hanging up here and so on. And there's a lot of fanciful stories, you know, from the child's imagination that go along with her experience, Tar Beach. And part of that is, I want to show you this, is that they would imagine that they were flying. And that becomes kind of a theme of Tar Beach. You can fly, spread your wings. You've heard a lot of those kinds of encouraging words. And so here it is. And this one, little bit more, a little bit more floral and probably a little bit more nostalgic. And another thing that she talked about, here's Faith and her children dancing at the Louvre, Mona Lisa, some of the other, Da Vinci over here, St. John, Christ and St. John and Mary. Bottom line, she told me a bunch of stories about this body of work too, and she loved France, and she was very open about how France was a lot more friendly to African Americans than was the United States at the time. And so she loved it. And here she is, French Collection Project at Duvernay. And so she's got herself in here. And some of the people are coming in and out, and what the heck? And so anyway, there she is, and she's painting, and these are various different women artists. And I want to zoom in on this. Just like Luncheon on the Grass by Edouard Manet. The woman is nude, the men are reclining, fully clothed, drinking some wine and conversing, waxing philosophical, if you will. This is Picasso, just saying. And so anyway, and you could see, you know, if you ever get the chance to see it, a lot of the explanation for the story is written right on sunflowers, another notable subject of Vincent van Gogh. And we see him here. And so in a lot of ways, this is about a lot of things. It's about her identity. It's about her heritage. It's about art about art, and French collection, Matisse's model. There's Henri Matisse. I didn't show you Matisse so much, but that's a famous Matisse painting. This is another quilt about Matisse's chapel, and Matisse, before his death, he was commissioned to do stained glass windows and other decoration for this chapel, and that's what this is. And she went there with her family. And another Picasso-esque, you guys would recognize this, Demoiselles of Avignon. And those ideas that Picasso was inspired by African art, African masks and stuff, that's all in there too. And she wrote about that. And Saint-Tropez, French collection, part 2, Joe Baker's birthday. And this right here is a image of a Matisse painting. Joe Baker, you guys know who Josephine Baker was? Anybody? She was from St. Louis. She was a dancer, performer, went to Paris, became a huge star in Paris. And she stayed there most of her life. She returned back to the US to visit, like in the 1960s, and that was quite a big deal. But you can see this at the St. Louis Art Museum. It's part of their collection. And if you want to see Josephine Baker, you want to go on U City, Loop, they have famous St. Louisans plaques. She's there too. So anyway, French collection. I want to zoom in on this. I showed you this one, portrait of Gertrude Stein. I'm sorry about the low res. I just copied scannings out of a book, and you can see. But anyway, if a bus could talk. By Faith Ringgold. And so when I got to talk with her and spent some time with her, I got to know her pretty well, and I think I'm representing her work here fairly. Basically, what we flew over the bridge, memoirs of Faith Ringgold. But what she had said and told me about is that she knew many African American celebrities. They were her friends. That's who she hangs with. And so she was telling me stories about Oprah Winfrey and stuff like that. They were pals, they hung out and stuff. So anyway, and Bill Cosby, that's pre-trial or whatever. But anyway, you can get to her website here. It still works. So as you can see, this is one of my old PowerPoints, like from when you guys were born or something. But at any rate. And so slideshow, slide. So anyway, a lot of things are taking shape here. All kinds of things that deal with identity, feminism, civil rights, racism, all kinds of things. Everything gets kind of thrown into the mix. And so when we're talking about the 70s, we kind of term that to be postmodern, but we also talk about that, at least at the time, it was called pluralism. And that meant that there were a lot of different things going on all over the place, and one may or may not have anything to do with the other. But here's another photographer, Cindy Sherman, very important in the history of photography. And what she does, she talks about feminism, about her own identity as well, but she uses a different strategy. She has these, what are in essence self-portraits. She gets in costume, she gets into a situation, a setting, and she becomes all of these different people, Cindy Sherman. And sometimes she may dress like somebody from a Caravaggio painting and get her photograph taken that way, or anything. So they're just all untitled film stills, 35. Sometimes they take on the identity of a battered woman, sometimes an executive in business. I mean, all different kinds of things. She's role playing, and that's really the point. She takes on all of these different personas. And again, where are they looking for inspiration? Inside their memories, their childhood, their own experience. Artist as subject and creator. And this is a starification object series, 10 black and white photographs and 16 chewing gum sculptures. And so she's placed these on her body, and they're kind of take on the identity of tattoos. And in ancient times, a lot of tattoos were not created with ink, but by actually cutting the skin and creating a scar. And I've known a few people that have done that anyway. But Ana Mendieta, flowers on body, woman as nature. And here she is. It's a photograph, earth body work with flowers. And here she is, covered with flowers, sort of a statement about woman-nature connection. And that's as old as time. When we talk about nature, even in ancient times, it's typically in the form of a female, a nature goddess. And we talk about nature as Mother Nature. And so these artists are reclaiming the identity of being female, of being woman. Magdalena Abacanos. And this is the piece right here. You can zoom in a little bit. I'll show you, like this piece, that's a Jackson Pollock. That's a Jackson Pollock. That's a Robert Rauschenberg. This big thing here is a Claes Oldenburg. But what we're looking at is this, facts. Magdalena Abacanowicz, Holocaust survivors, made these fiberglass resin shells, burlap, fiberglass, made these shells, and they're hollow. And they just kind of don't have an individual identity, and in this case, they're all sitting down. Excuse me. But she was a Holocaust survivor. And this is a statement about the Holocaust, that these people are hollow, they don't have an identity, and they were murdered by the millions. And so that's it in a nutshell. And then we have other artists going out into the environment. It's called the Earth Art Movement. And he makes this basically with a bulldozer, a lot of rocks, a lot of gravel put together as a spiral. Now, what is the point? Why is that art? Well, Smithson would tell you that a lot of art that stems even from ancient times had been done with the medium of earthworks. And if you don't believe me, you can take a look at effigy mounds, Cahokia mounds. There's an interesting serpentine effigy mound in Ohio, very famous. Artists all over the globe have been making earthworks forever. And so Smithson's not creating this out of his own personal identity, but it's basically a throwback and to look at the history of art and bring it into what then was the 20th century. And here's a different kind of tag. This is Joseph Beuys, How to Explain Pictures to a Dead Hair. A performance piece. Some artists are moving towards doing a performance. There's nothing left. There's no artifact. You can't buy and sell it in a gallery. And a lot of these artists, performance artists, were really kind of leery of the whole art market gallery system. In fact, they kind of despised that. They thought it was way too commercial. And so doing a performance, he had art. It lasted for however long the performance did, and then it went away. And the only thing you have left are these artifacts, the photographs. And Joseph Beuys was a performance artist. Here, Carol E. Schneemann, Meet Joy. It's a feminist piece. And basically what she has here is a bunch of almost nude people just around groping each other. And I'll show you this. But this is like a chicken. And there's another. They got all of these dead animals that involved in this too. So anyway, it's kind of a statement about a lot of different things about sexism, about vegetarianism. You know, you can read this in all sorts of ways. And performance art, homage to New York. This guy, Jean Tinguely, he made this big contraption with bicycle wheels and gears and motors and all different kinds of stuff, as you can see. And it was made to self-destruct. See, it's just prior to its self-destruction in the garden of the Museum of Modern Art, New York. And it too was a performance. And so anyway, I do want to show you a couple of other things. I think I'll go with Jeff Koons here. Come on. And so, getting on into the century here, Jeff Koons. Jeff Koons is a guy that kind of brings a lot of different things together. These are triple-decker wet dry vacuum cleaners, and he put them together in a plexiglass box, fluorescent lights. It looks like something that comes out of maybe a department store display. And so, like, what's that all about? Well, you would talk to Jeff Koons, and I've read and seen a lot of what he had to say over the years, and he talked about just putting things out there. And he was kind of like Andy Warhol in that he was fascinated with consumer goods. Warhol with his soup cans and Brillo boxes and stuff. Koons takes something as benign as new vacuum cleaners and sort of glorify them in this thing. And I remember him talking about this, things like he thought this was like a sarcophagus, that once he did this, these vacuum cleaners were kind of mummified. They were suspended animation. They were maybe had their links to ancient Egyptian mummies or something. Whatever you want to get out of it is what it is. New Hoover convertible vacuum cleaners, same concept. One ball total equilibrium tank as this basketball in a fish tank floating in there. That's all it is. Baccarat crystal set. Bear and policeman. And so what he's doing is just like Andy Warhol, he's taken things from consumer culture and putting them out there as art. He makes them, or he'll commission people to make them. Some of these things like this, these ceramic pieces, he actually commissioned the people who made the Precious Moments, those little tchotchkes, the little ceramic figurines. Actually had designed this and had those guys do the ceramic casting and firing of these pieces. But Michael Jackson and Bubbles, right out of popular, right out of culture. And then he gets on this idea of balloons. Balloons that Mylar balloons. And so this looks like something that you would probably see, you know, and Mylar balloons are so ubiquitous today. They're all over the place. You can go to Deerbergs and they'll fill one of your Mylar balloons with helium, says happy birthday or congratulations or whatever. This is like a Mylar balloon of a bunny, but it's made out of steel. And if you knocked on it, it would ring hollow. It's not a Mylar balloon at all. It's meant to look like one. It's so highly polished. And the detail is so exquisite that it has a lot of the wrinkles and things that you find on a Mylar balloon as well. And so anyway, these ceramic things, Pink Panther. Look what this sold for. And this is an old slide. It sold 25 years ago for almost $2 million. So Jeff Koons, is really kind of the next great pop artist, although, here, I'll read this. This is out of Christie's website. Focusing on the various artistic movements of this time, from minimalism and conceptualism to graffiti art, Britpop, cutting edge artistic expressions of the day, sales continue to break records. So anyway, kind of putting it all together here. This is he and his wife put together as though it were an ancient Greek statue. But it also seems to have some kind of campiness about it. It seemed kind of lowbrow. Puppy. This was a piece put together in Germany, and it's basically flowers. Live flowers. What he did was construct a steel, what you call a armature, a skeleton, if you will, and put it together and adorn this with live flowers, puppy. So in a lot of ways, he kind of wants to go, who is Jeff Koons and why are people saying such terrible things about him? Cool art, high prices from Barron's. This is almost quaint, though. This isn't one of my old PowerPoints from the day, but I thought I'd show you some of the stuff that's not in the text. Jeff Koons, ceramic puppy with flowers. And there he is, Jeff Koons. And bottom line is that this stuff is deliberately very low brow. It's not profound. It's not telling you things about the ages. It's not trying to connect to ancient humankind. It's just here. It's consumer goods. It's it's reflecting the culture in the same way that Warhol did. And so that's all I had in. I got to say that there's some I don't have in here, and I'm going to update this before I bring it out of mothballs again. But he does these giant balloon animal sculptures. You know, you go to a birthday party and they got these long balloons, and you have somebody there twisting them up, putting them together, and you can make a dog or a bunny rabbit or something like that, you know. He makes these, but they're on a large scale. They're like 6-8 feet high. And so anyway, he's still out there. And let me make sure I got my share. Good. And I brought this one out too, because I think she's pretty important. Barbara Kruger. Your gaze hits the side of my face. Again, right out of feminist literature, feminist writings, the male gaze. That's a term coined in the 1970s, early 1980s about male objectification of women. And so anyway, she does words, text that supports the image. As you see, your gaze at the side of my face. We have received orders not to move. I will not become what I mean to you. Your comfort is my silence. When I hear the word culture, I take out my checkbook. You kill time. We are not made for each other. Your moments of joy have the precision of military strategy. You construct intricate rituals which allow you to touch the skin of other men. So this is all a critique of gender roles and how we behaved, or how we behaved at the time. It may seem quaint now, in part because we've kind of got past a lot of this stuff. But this, your body is a battle. And this image is still used a lot, especially on the debate of legalized abortion. And so I've been seeing this kind of pop up. It became kind of a flag. It became kind of the icon for that debate, for those laws, for that issue, I should say. And here's what it would be. It says, March on Washington in support of abortion, birth control, and women's rights. And here it is, pasted all over the place. And so what she does is kind of, and it's been talked about a lot, she was in the business of advertising. She worked for an advertising firm for a long time. And she uses a lot of the same strategies that are used in advertising design and especially of the day of magazine design. And I believe she worked for Newsweek. I know she had a couple of Newsweek covers. But at any rate, there's always this kind of moral lesson that she's trying to convey. And so let's see, where do I got it? Oh man, I'm messing it up again. Always happens when I get too many windows open. And let me go here. Share screen, is this what we're looking at? Yes. And are still recording, and participants now see your screen. And I'm going to call it a day, because you know what? It's nice outside. I got way too many windows open, which means I've said enough for today. And so when we come back on Monday, we're going to be seeing what you guys put together. I am very much looking forward to that. Have any problems, any technical problems, or any issues at all? Send me a message on Canvas. I'll get it. So, pleasant weekend to all of you guys, and thanks for watching.
Have a good weekend.
You too. Thanks.
Have a good one.
You too. Thank you.